With Moralis Server, you are able to send HTTP requests from Cloud Functions. Why would you need to do that? Well, within your application, you might need to call external APIs. And the way that you would do that is to wrap the HTTP request to that external API inside of a Cloud function. And using Moralis Cloud Functions, you'd be able to send GET requests and POST requests. You'd be able to use port numbers. You would be able to pass headers if you needed to, query parameters, and even follow redirects if required. There's some information about the response object down here, but I want to show you a couple of examples of how we can use an external API, wrap the call inside of a Cloud function, and use it within our applications. Okay, so let's get started. We need to define a Moralis Cloud function wrapper, if you like. So let's just write this out as moralis.cloud.define. We'll give it a name. We'll just call this request1. And the syntax is the same as it always is. So you could just copy a previous function that you have. And then inside here, we're going to need to return something. Now we'll go back to the documentation and go and get the code we're going to use. So let's go and take this one here. And we will actually return that particular Cloud function. There's a few things we're going to need to do to change here. First of all, this URL needs to change to a CoinGecko API. We need to change that. And that will return a promise, which we will then be able to do something with. And this is the bit that we need to edit, because we're not going to be console logging anything, but we do want to be working on this HTTP response.txt. And we're going to need to pass that and save that into some sort of variable. So we'll call this results, json.pass. Now we haven't declared results, so we may as well just do that up here. So we'll just let results equal an empty string for now, and then we'll fill that afterwards down here. Make sure we call it results. And I may also as well just let the URL equal the CoinGecko URL that we're going to be using, and we'll just pass that in here as a URL instead. We'll tidy up some of these comments. One was for success, one was for error. And then once we've got the results, we can return that. That should give us back what we need. If there's a problem, then we will get a response. We've got an empty variable called results, which we will fill. We've got the CoinGecko URL, which we need to go and get. That'll pass into our HTTP request. We'll pass the result and then return it back to us. Excellent. That should work fine. Let's go and get the URL that we need then from CoinGecko. So if we go to Google and search for CoinGecko API, this one will work. And when we load that up, we want to go and use the markets, the coins markets endpoint. I'll go and try that out. We'll change the currency type to USD, maybe change the results to 50. And then we'll execute that to get the request URL, copy that, back to our code, paste that in here, and then let's try this function out. It's called request1. If we go back to our front end, and then we can run this. So we'll await moralis.cloud.run. The name of the function was request1. There are no query parameters, and then we'll do a search for that, and it should return 50 results with all of the information that we want. Great. But what if we wanted to change that query? What if we wanted to get maybe 10 or 100 different results back? It would be good if we could pass through some parameters inside there to affect the results. So we could type in something like number 10. Now at the moment that won't do anything because the parameter is just going to be ignored. But if we come back to our cloud code and write a new function, copy this one, and we'll call this request2. What we can do instead is pass through a variable. So in here, in this request URL, we could look at this number here and have that as a variable. What we'd need to do is convert the string into a template literal that we can pass in JavaScript as well. And this 50, we'll make a variable by using the variable syntax. And we want to give it a number. And we'll let the number equal the request.params.num that we'll be passing it. Make sense? If we save that and then go and run request number 2, got rid of my previous one, so we'll change this, and let's see if this works. There we go. Maybe we can change that to 100, and it will do the same thing. Okay, excellent. But what about if we want to change the result that we're getting back? What about if we don't want all of this information? We don't want symbol, name, and image, and all this stuff. We just want it to say something like Bitcoin and price. That's it. So we want to try and return some kind of custom object. For example, something that looks exactly like this. So if you pause the video here, see if you can create a solution that instead of providing all of the previous data that you had, i.e. this, we want to try and convert the response so it gives us that. Pause the video, see if you can complete that, and I'll see you in a second with the solution. Okay, back in the code. Hopefully you managed to do that easily enough. If we just copy request 2, we'll call this request 3, and we're going to make some changes to do this. All of this information will be exactly the same. All of this information will be exactly the same, except for when we get into our function here. Now, we've got the results here, but I want to actually now do something different. So how do you take an array, change it, and then respond with a new array? Well, you use a map. If I create a new variable, let's just call this res, and we'll do a results.map. And for each result, we're going to do something. We'll create a new object, and it's just going to have a key value. Oh, I've just missed out. And so what do we need? We're going to need the, let's have a look. So what are we going to need? We're going to need the ID, and we're going to need the current underscore price. ID and current underscore price. That will be result.id and result.current underscore price. So I'll do that first of all here, result.id, and we'll make that equal to result.current underscore price. Oh, underscore price. And once I've created that object, we can return it back inside of the new map. Got an error here. Missed something out there. And we're not using res because we're going to be returning results still, so we can just simply do that. Any errors? Doesn't look like it. Let's save that, and we'll test out request 3 in the front end. And we'll open up that object, and there you go. Excellent. So there's a few examples of how you could use a cloud function to call an external API with the HTTP request that's available for you in the Moralis server. And as I said at the beginning of the video, if you needed to specify a port number, you can do that inside of the request URL. The valid port numbers are listed down here. If you need to follow the redirects, then you can use the follow redirects option and change that to true. For query parameters, you could do it a few ways. You could use a template literal like I did previously in our API example, or you could pass it through as a parameters object inside of the HTTP request. If the URL requires it, Moralis will then append your query to the end of your query string, or you can pass through a raw string that would look something like that. Setting headers is simple. You can follow this example down here. And a post request example is down here as well. Another super powerful tool that you can use as part of your application using the Moralis server.